everybody. We're just waiting to get started here. Thank you for joining us today on PantheraTV Live. This is our first PantheraTV Live episode to be hosted on Facebook Live instead of Instagram Live, so very exciting. If you've missed any of our others, you can watch them all on our Instagram page or our YouTube page, and they've been posted, of course, on our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So you can learn a lot about any of the topics we've covered before: fishing cats, snow leopards, tiger photography, if you just check out those videos. Today is Giving Tuesday. It's the day of the year that we all give back to the organizations and the people and the causes that we believe in. So we're asking our supporters to give back to Panthera and our critical wildcat conservation efforts. And you can do that by visiting our homepage, panthera.org, or by contributing to our Facebook fundraiser on our page. So we're waiting for some people to join us today. Today we're very lucky because we're going to be talking to Panthera's chief scientist and the head of our tiger program, Dr. John Goodrich. Thank you everyone for joining us. I see more and more people logging on. Where is everybody watching from today? I see Chrissy. I know she's watching from New Jersey. Hi, Chrissy. And John will be with us just a moment. So just a reminder, if you didn't hear me say so before, today is Giving Tuesday, and you can learn more about it and how to support Panthera's effort at panthera.org or through the fundraiser page right on our Facebook. Canada. Already snowing in Canada. Goodness. I guess it is December. That makes sense. Oh, and it looks like Dr. Goodrich is here, so I'm going to invite him in now. Hi.
Hi, Jamie. Sorry, technical difficulties on my end. Can you hear me?
You're a little low.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling from today?
I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Is it snowing there?
No, we might get some snow today, but it's not really looking like it. It's at about a 20% chance.
So today, as you know, is very special because it's Giving Tuesday, and it's also a chance for us to reveal our new regional strategies, which is what you're going to be talking about. But first, why don't you give a quick introduction of yourself and what you do at Panthera for our viewers?
Sure. My name is John Goodrich, and I am Senior Director of the Tiger Program and have been since 2012, and also Chief Scientist for Panthera.
Perfect, and to the point. So 2021 is an important year for Panthera because it's our 15th anniversary.
Mm.
How have we grown in the last 15 years?
Well, we've grown a lot. You know, we started in 2006 as a very small group um, that was largely based on large cat species programs, especially tigers, lions, jaguars. Um, and in the beginning, we mostly operated as an organization that gave grants to and worked through other organizations that were already established on the ground around the world. But from there, we slowly grew based on these big cat species programs to establish ourselves on the ground across the globe where we were running our own project. And so a few years ago, we were a mix of projects that were Panthera led on the ground and projects that were led by other organizations that we were largely supporting. But some of our largest changes have come over the past 2 to 3 years. And during this time, we've switched from an organization that focused almost exclusively on large cats to one that protects all 40 of the world's cat species. We've developed conservation strategies for all species and regional strategies to implement our species strategies. In all cases, we are establishing ourselves, or in most cases, I should say, we're establishing ourselves as the lead organization on the ground. We're trying to be established as a legal entity in every country where we work. But we've also changed from, well, before I say that, we've also developed conservation strategies for all species in these regional strategies, and that has helped us to change from an organization that was organized by species programs that operated somewhat independently of each other to one that works across species and regions in a well-connected manner. This helps us to integrate our ideas and our projects. So, for example, projects working on human-lion conflict in Africa are not working in isolation of similar projects working on human-jaguar conflict in South and Central America. They're connected, they're working together and sharing ideas. And this helps us to integrate our ideas in our projects. And these strategies help us to better use our greatest strength, which is our cadre of big cat, or cadre of cat scientists, not just big cats, to work together and recover the world's cat population.
Great. So 15 years of good work. What does the future hold, and how are the regional strategies that we're unveiling specifically going to shape that future? What do we have in store?
I think Panthera is going to grow considerably over the next 10 years. We've gone from a very small organization to a medium-sized organization with over 150 people working on the ground across the globe, I think in about 50 different countries. So over the next 10 years, we're going to grow. We don't want to get too big, but we do intend to grow. And our strategies are going to define and guide our growth. They lay out the critical threats to cats across the world, and those are the threats that we will focus on, and they outline the interventions that we need to counter those threats. And for cats in general, there are really only 3 big threats. One is poaching, largely for the traditional Asian medicine market. The second is habitat loss, and depending on the cat species, poaching may be the greater threat, habitat loss may be the greater threat. More often than not, it's probably more habitat related, but for species like tigers that are extremely valuable, poaching is the top threat. And then the third threat tends to be human-cat conflict, where you have cats that sometimes even attack people, but usually it's cats attacking livestock, or if you're talking about small cats, cats attacking chickens, things like that. So those are the three big threats that we tend to focus on across the globe. And so keeping or better connecting our different species programs has been really important, because all of us are working on anti-poaching activities. All of us are working on human-cat conflict activities, or activities to protect and expand critical habitats and connect those habitats. So the way Panthera is now, we're better able to work together and share lessons learned. And then the other part of the equation, and will be a big part of our growth, is we're implementing those interventions to counter threats, but a critical part is also monitoring cat populations to ensure that we're having the desired impact. And this is one of the things that Panthera is really good at, and that we're really focused on, making sure that our conservation interventions are working. That means monitoring the interventions themselves to ensure they're working, but ultimately the cat numbers are increasing.
So we're tackling all of these threats for all of these species, and as you mentioned, we used to be more focused on the different big cat species, but now with our regional strategies, we're integrating multi-species management into our conservation efforts. Can you explain why this is important?
Yeah, it's because we're trying to protect biodiversity at large, using cats as sort of that umbrella for biodiversity. So all Panthera long-term sites, we're building multi-species programs. So where we had a tiger site, say in Thailand and Southeast Asia, it's still a tiger site. Our focus is still tigers, but we're trying to protect all cats at that site. So these programs will ensure, and well, I guess when we're protecting all cats, we're also protecting the prey. And what this means is we need to identify and counter the critical threats, not just for tigers, but all the other cat species, and then implement interventions to counter those threats. So the threats to a tiger might be very different to the threats to a clouded leopard or to a fishing cat on any of these sites. And then we need to monitor the cat's populations to ensure that we're having that positive impact. This gets a little bit tricky. Tigers are pretty easy to monitor. We do that by putting camera traps out in the forest, photographing the tigers. Each tiger is individually identifiable by their stripes. So tiger stripes are like a fingerprint. So we can use that information to count tigers. Cats that don't have spots or stripes, those individually specific identifying marks, are much tougher to count. And plus, setting out camera traps to photograph tigers is a little bit different, for example, than setting out camera traps to photograph clouded leopards, because clouded leopards will avoid tigers. They might not go to the same places, and they also spend a lot of time up in the trees. So the monitoring challenge of dealing with multi-species is a big one, and one that we're working hard to crack at this point. But if you think about it, if we're protecting all these cat species, we need to be protecting their prey species and ensuring that their prey species are thriving, because cats can't survive without prey, of course. For prey to survive, we need to ensure that the habitat is in place, and all their food and water resources are in place. And so really, we're protecting everything. We're protecting these large ecosystems and all of the biodiversity, plants and animals, within those ecosystems.
Yeah, and I think that's a point that we've been trying to make a lot in the last year, especially with everything going on with the wildfires, the pandemics, things that stem from changes in biodiversity, how everything is connected and how everything is a part of one another, and how saving cats saves everything, really, when you think about it. And I think that's why our regional strategies are so great, because we're saving cats and we're also saving the wild places they live, and everything else that lives in them, and all the ecosystem services that they provide.
Exactly. And, you know, COVID is a great example. As I mentioned before, poaching for illegal wildlife trade for traditional Asian medicine is one of the biggest threats to tigers and many other cat species. Well, where did COVID come from? It's suspected that it came from a wild animal held in a wildlife market in China. And so by our operations and our interventions to stop poaching of cats and wildlife trade that supports that poaching, we are also helping to prevent the next pandemic.
Right, which is definitely very important and very timely.
Yeah.
So I know we're here to talk about all the regional strategies and all the different 40 species of cats, but you're the tiger expert, so I have to ask you to talk a little bit about tiger conservation, because it's Tiger Tuesday and everyone loves them.
Absolutely.
So what's the update in the world of tigers?
You know, despite being arguably the most charismatic large vertebrate in the world, tigers are still the most endangered of the big cat and one of the most endangered mammal species in the world. But when we look at tiger conservation across the globe, there's good news and some bad news. So I'll start with the good news. The good news is that in South Asia, so especially India, Nepal, and Bhutan, and to a lesser extent Bangladesh, tigers are doing pretty well. These countries have done a really good job of protecting tigers and increasing tiger numbers. India has increased tiger numbers considerably over the past 10 to 12 years. Nepal is probably going to double their tiger population over the past 10 to 12 years once those results come out. So things are going well there. Things are also going pretty well in Russia and northeastern China. In Russia, tiger populations we don't have real good data, but the numbers are at least stable, if not increasing. And in northeastern China, they've worked hard to recover habitat over the past 10 years, and for the first time in decades, they've actually established a breeding population of Siberian tigers in northeastern China. And that's huge. It's a small population for now, but until then, Siberian tigers were only found in Russia. They're doing pretty well there, as I've said, but having tigers in only one country, or any species in only one country, if things go wrong in that country, there's no backup. And so having that second population in China really protects them against extinction and against things going wrong in China. The bad news for tigers is in Southeast Asia. We have lost tigers from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam since the turn of the century. And tigers in Malaysia are not doing well. Some organizations have predicted that they may go extinct in Malaysia within the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm a little bit more optimistic than that, but it's a pretty dire situation in Malaysia. And Myanmar, there are a few tigers left, one very, very small breeding population that we know of. Tigers are doing a little bit better in Thailand and Indonesia, but still things are bad there, and it's largely because poaching for wildlife trade is so intense in Southeast Asia. And so, to tell you how bad the poaching problem is, there are over 1 million square kilometers. I'm sorry, I think in metric and not in square miles. But there's over 1 million square kilometers of vacant tiger habitat out there. Much of it is in Southeast Asia, and it's vacant because tigers have been poached out. So the habitat is there, there's just no tigers. And that's a very depressing statistic, but on the other hand, it's a really encouraging statistic, because that means there are 1 million square kilometers of habitat out there where we can recover tiger populations. You know, once the habitat is lost, it's been turned into a city, it's really hard to recover it. But if the habitat is there, recovering populations is much easier.
So obviously Panthera is working across different sites in Southeast Asia. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we're doing there to fight these, unfortunately, very dramatic declines?
Sure. All of our programs, you know, within our tiger program, we're really focused on addressing the critical threats. And as I mentioned, the critical threat for tigers is poaching. So we're really focused on that poaching problem. And we're really focused on not just protecting tiger populations, but recovering them, increasing tiger numbers. So the way we do that is we choose the best sites that are out there where tiger numbers are depressed. We identify the critical threats, and again, it's almost always poaching, and we try to address those threats. And that often means anti-poaching patrols, or always means anti-poaching patrols in all the sites where we work. But there's a lot more to it than that. You know, you need the carrot and the stick. The anti-poaching patrols have a certain preventative measure, and you can react to situations on the ground. For example, if somebody's gone in and set a snare line, you can go and remove those snares, and sometimes even get lucky and catch the poachers. But we need to be doing a lot more than that. We need to be, and we are working with local communities to help them improve their livelihood so they're not dependent on poaching. And, you know, there's different levels of poaching. There's targeted tiger poaching, where people are trying to make money, essentially. There's poaching of tiger prey, where people are just trying to make ends meet. You know, if you're worried about feeding your kids tomorrow, you will go into whatever national park to poach a deer to feed your children. Well, that has a big impact on tigers. And those are the threats that we can address through community interventions. And even for example, in Manas in India, even things like people going into the park. It's illegal to go into the national park. A lot of people do things like collect firewood to cook on. They really need that. But when our patrol teams encounter a person in the park collecting firewood, rather than arresting that person and giving them a fine, we give them a warning, but we also refer them to our livelihoods program. And the livelihoods program can then make interventions like maybe help them grow firewood plots or give them a propane stove so that they don't need firewood to cook on. And of course, those things work much better than a fine. A fine just makes them poorer and in greater need of things like firewood or whatever collected from the reserve. And then on top of those types of interventions, we count tiger numbers on our site every single year to ensure that we're having that impact. You know, tigers are the currency of tiger conservation. If we're not making more tigers, we need to do something different.
I know most of that counting is done with camera traps, correct?
Yes, yeah. And again, the way we do that, tigers are individually identifiable by their stripes, so we can lace a protected area with cameras, get tons of pictures of tigers over the course of a couple of months, and then use some modeling techniques to understand how many tigers we've counted and how many other tigers are out there that we might have missed in our camera traps, and come up with that population estimate. And the great thing is, sorry, you know, this model works. It's been proven. It's been proven by Panthera, and it's been proven by many other organizations working on tiger conservation. And we are increasing tiger numbers. In Manas, tiger numbers have increased more than threefold since we started there in 2012. In various sites in Nepal, tiger numbers have increased by as much as 450% over the past 5 years. So it's really exciting and very satisfying to go in and help implement these models. And we're always working with local NGOs and working with the local government. And when it comes to poaching patrols, it's the government that does that work. We can provide training, we can provide support, but it's really satisfying to go in, help them implement that, and then see it work and see tiger numbers increase.
Right. One of our viewers has a question about corridor protection and how that factors into protecting tigers. They mentioned India, but you can speak to it anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good question, and that's sort of the higher end of our model. So once we've gone in and we've identified an important protected area, we've implemented our poaching patrols, our community interventions, and things are going well, and tiger numbers start to increase, then we need to look to the larger landscape and start taking on other interventions. One of those is ensuring that those protected areas are connected to other protected areas. So this tiger population isn't isolated, that we don't have to worry about problems with inbreeding. And so ensuring that those corridors are protected, or where they don't exist, working to create those corridors to ensure that those tiger populations are connected into a larger meta population is the critical piece of the puzzle.
I think one of the things that people don't always realize, or maybe they do, is that some of these cat species, tigers especially, you don't actually ever get to really see them, or if you do, it's rare. I know that many scientists who study tigers don't ever see a tiger in the wild, but I know you've been lucky enough to encounter them, to collar them. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what's it like seeing one of these majestic animals in person.
Yeah, so I cut my teeth on tiger research starting in 1995 when I moved to Russia to run the Siberian Tiger Project for the Wildlife Conservation Society. And so I lived and worked there for 15 years, just doing field research on tigers. It was like the greatest job in the world. And we did that by using radio telemetry. So we had to capture tigers, fit them with collars, and then follow them and collect data on them. And we were trying to learn the basic ecology of Siberian tigers in Russia so that we would know what we needed to do to protect them. Mm-hmm. So it was, I still remember to this day the first time I saw a tiger. I grew up in New York State, and when I had moved out west and lived out west for about 10 years before I moved to Russia. When I arrived in Russia, the landscape was just like the Adirondack Mountains in New York. I felt like I was coming home. And the first tiger I saw in that landscape, I was in a helicopter, and we were trying to capture this tiger to change its radio color. And so to be flying over this mountainous forest and looking down through the trees, it was in the winter, so the leaves were off the trees, and you could see. And, you know, this place that was so familiar, and yet all of a sudden there's a tiger running below the helicopter through this forest that looked just like home. It was surreal. It was mind-boggling. But, you know, their tigers are magnificent when you see one in the field, especially if you're on foot in the forest by yourself. Seeing a tiger is a pretty, you know, exhilarating and terrifying experience all at the same time.
I can't imagine. That's what's so great about Panthera, is that we get to use their scientists who are on the ground and, you know, connect them with our audiences, who are really the reason why we can do what we do. Thanks to our supporters, we have, you know, the money to fund all this important science and conservation action. And as I mentioned before, today is Giving Tuesday, so it's a global day of giving, and there are a lot of worthy causes out there. But why should people choose Panthera to support this Giving Tuesday? What makes us worthy of their support?
Well, because we are the only organization in the world that exclusively works to protect all the world's wildcats, and we're good at it. You know, we've been doing this for a long time. As an organization, Panthera is only 15 years old. We're young, but as cat biologists, we are a group of very experienced scientists that have been, most of us have been in the field for much more than 15 years. We've developed models that work. We've proven that they work. And, you know, if you're giving money to Panthera, you want to protect cat populations. And that's what we do. And we don't just protect them, we recover them, we increase them. So I think we're a good go-to organization. But we're also, you know, a big part of our conservation model, and a very critical part of our conservation model, is that we are focused on building local capacity. You know, it can't be me as an American leading the charge for tiger conservation in Thailand. It needs to be Thai biologists and Thai conservationists doing that. And that's what we're focused on, and that's sustainable. It's not sustainable for me as an American to go and do that as a foreigner. It needs to be part of that country. It needs to be part of their government and part of their culture. And so building that is really important, and Panthera tries to do that in every country where we work.
Absolutely. And another thing I think is worth mentioning is that our focus is not on saving cats in an isolated world. We work with communities, we work with people who live alongside cats, and we help them as well, because it's really like helping everyone to coexist.
Absolutely.
So if you're just turned in and you missed any of that, today is Giving Tuesday, and we're happy to talk about our efforts and why you should support Panthera. And you can donate at panthera.org or through our Facebook fundraiser. And there are other ways you can support Panthera. You can renew yourself as a wildcat advocate, you can continue to educate yourself about what's going on in the world of wildcats and conservation. Use your power of purchasing to make good, sustainable choices. Use your vote to vote for people who will support conservation initiatives, and just be a voice for the voiceless, as our late Dr. Alan Rabinovitz would say. Whichever way you choose to do it, we are grateful every day for the support of our people on the ground and our people online, and everybody who helps Panthera do what we do every day. So once again, you can visit panthera.org to learn more about us and our Giving Tuesday campaign. And Dr. Goodrich, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jamie, and thanks everybody that's watching and listening. Really appreciate your taking the time.
Absolutely. So everyone, hope you enjoy the rest of your Tiger Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.